Hi, everybody. This is Glain Roberts-McCabe here. I am the founder and president of the Roundtable. We're an organization that helps leaders navigate change, disruption, and growth. And I'm here to talk about why you should not leave your career in the hands of your manager. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Leadership development is certainly a hot subject, but we also know that most leaders, certainly evolving leaders, are facing a huge gap in their development. So how can we as leaders traverse that gap, particularly in a way that doesn't become sort of a massive suck on senior leaders? Well, stay tuned because that's where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that transforms everything, transforms meaning into action. To find out more, you can go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, the Curiosity Bites podcast. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how can we bring people together who completely disagree? This is exactly what your heart and your soul and your mind have been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some real and at times intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people. We're talking about multi-Grammy award-winning entertainers, quantum physicists, neuroscientists, astronauts, philosophers, holy people, skeptics, entrepreneurs. It is a fascinating lineup of an amazing people. Some folks you might actually think you truly disagree with, and then you'll find them absolutely fascinating. Simply go to dovbaron.com to find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into the delicious Curiosity Bites. As always, you can find out about both shows on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. And we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get over there and rate, review, and subscribe to the show. We really appreciate it if you do that. And if you are a regular listener, a big thank you to for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We're honored and grateful also to Inc.com for citing us as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also listen to us on Google Home and Alexa. Just simply say, play Dov Baron podcast. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. We've all heard the saying, it's lonely at the top, and yet people are clamoring to the top. However, does it actually have to be lonely at the top? Well, my guest and I would suggest that it doesn't have to be lonely at the top. And what's more, that when we confront this illusion head on, we may have the answer to the leadership development gap that I talked about earlier. But how? Well, that's where we're going today. You see, my guest is Glain Roberts-McCabe. Now, Glain is the founder and president of the Roundtable community. The Roundtable was awarded a gold award by the Canadian Awards of Training Excellence in partnership with PepsiCo Canada in 2018. Glain was named as one of the top women entrepreneurs in Canada. She helps thousands of leaders connect to their purpose, build their community, and live their legacy every single day. She's written articles and publications for outlets like the Globe and Mail, Canadian Manager Magazine, and has spoken to audiences around the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome the best-selling author of the Grassroots Leadership Revolution, Glain Roberts-McCabe.
I love it. What an intro. Can I take you with me always, everywhere?
Yeah, everybody wants to take me into their house so that when you walk in, that I do this and the family has go, what?
My husband would love that. He would love that. Here I come. I think I should just gonna take that recording and play it all around.
You can do that. I give you my permission.
Thanks.
So here's where we always like to start, the same place as always, which is in this world of influencers and all those people who claim to be important. Who is somebody that we might not know, may not even consider, who's been a massive influence on you and on your leadership?
Well, you know what? I'm going to give you the stereotypical response, which is my dad. My dad probably has shaped my leadership more than for the good and the bad. I would say for the good and the bad. My dad was the coach for the Canadian rugby team. He was the first paid coach of a rugby team in England, which is where I hail from. And he was a quintessential rugby guy. Like there was a lot of testosterone in my house, and he was he ruled the roost, man. And you know, a typical Welsh father born of a certain era. And but what I learned from him so much was he was very anti-authority, misplaced authority. Let me say that correctly. Very anti-misplaced authority. He really taught me to question misplaced authority. You know, as a youngster, took great pride in kind of the fact that us kids, I'm the oldest of four, that we're all incredibly independent. Really felt that if a job wasn't working to you, so this I'll tell you the story that really sums up my dad. There he is. He's got four little kids under the age of 9. He was a teacher at the time, coaching rugby on the side, you know, for a club, and got offered a job to move to Canada. And he told me the story many years later that, you know, at parties, he took the job, and parties, people were saying, oh, wow, that's a big move. You're going to move your whole family to Canada. Hope you had a good contract. And my dad said, well, what would a good contract be? And they said, well, at least 3 years. You got to have a 3-year minimum contract if you're going to up your family, move to Canada. And my dad said, you know, yeah, I had a 3-month contract, right? That was my dad. He was a risk taker. He tried things, but he was incredibly passionate. He was incredibly passionate about rugby. He felt there was a bigger purpose for the boys that were in rugby, and you know, felt that it gave them this opportunity to do much more in their lives. And I think watching somebody pursue their passion through their whole career, when he was finished with the rugby union, he left it. And then he reinvented himself as a real estate broker, and then moved back to England and had a big successful career in real estate. And so I've always sort of, you know, with my dad, he really did instill that, even though he was never an entrepreneur, it was that entrepreneurial spirit that, you know, hey, just because somebody's going to tell you you can't do something, he had a million mottos. I know you're, you know, from the UK too, like we love our sayings, right? And he always used to say, don't trust so-called experts, you know, never trust so-called experts. And he was the guy that, you know, would do all the plumbing in our house and renovate the house. And I'd say, how did you learn how to do that? And he'd say, well, I saw I hired a guy once to show up, saw how he showed up, you know, with his pants down around halfway down around his butt. And I figured if a guy like that can do it, surely I could do it. And I think those are just really huge lessons. And in leadership, you know, a lot of it is being willing to step out on your own, to be brave, to take risk, to have courage, and to question authority, right? You've got to sometimes go, yeah, I know you're the CEO, but you've got it wrong right now. Right. And so, yeah.
So that's interesting. So tell us about that. Tell us, how do you instill that in the people you're working with? Because, you know, I mean, you have to think about it, right? Because you are the contradictory, because you are the expert, you are the so-called expert. And so what's that like for you to instill in the people? Because that means that you're, you know, it's kind of contradictory.
Yeah. No, it's true, right? And you know, and then I think it is contradictory, because when you think about, you know, who do you value, right? The people on your team. Do you value the people that are sitting there going, yeah, Glain, anything you say, Glain, like no problem, Glain. No, you value the people that are going to say, you know what? I know you think this the right thing to do, but can I give you some other data? Can I
Hmm.
give you another perspective? And I think that's what I mean. Like being low authority, it doesn't mean that you're being a jerk. It doesn't mean that you're, calling your boss an idiot in the middle of a meeting. What
No.
it means is that just because that person is at a hierarchy and a higher hierarchy than you are in the organization does not mean that you cannot add value to the situation and that your perspective isn't important. What I find, which is really interesting, is that deference to authority is something that I think gets instilled in you very young. And you see it culturally, like you'll see certain cultures where that
Yeah.
deference to authority. And in the West, we're much more like, hey, challenge, push back,
Sure.
give us another view, right? And you'll see, like when I've coached people who are from other parts of the world where that's not the way you do it, right? That's often one of their biggest stumbling blocks in moving ahead in the organization. I once coached a guy who is military family.
Hmm.
And the CEO would say to me all the time, he's not pushing back hard enough. And I remember doing a meeting with this guy and the head of HR, and the head of HR said to him, every once in a while, you should just bang your fist on this table and just say, you know, this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it. But it was so difficult for
Hmm.
him to do that because he had it really, it was really part of his value set. So what I find is I have some people on my team that they come to it very naturally. They're quite comfortable telling me when I've missed the boat. But I have other ones, the people that are more people pleasers, more supportive. They have a
Hmm.
worldview that's like, I'm here to help Glain look good, and helping Glain look good is all about agreeing with her. I have to kind of go, no, no, no. And we use the language, we have a 360 that we use that measures behavior. And one of the behaviors it measures is authority.
Hmm.
And if I see people with high authority on my team, I'm always saying to them, you're going to have to lower that score. You're going to
Hmm.
have to start doing something, whether it's increasing the assertiveness, increasing the challenge behavior, but something to get that authority score down.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, like we do a lot of work, as you know, with like high performers, high potentials. And I've looked at a lot of composite data over the years for, what differentiates the people that we perceive to be high performers. All of them have a lower authority score. None of them are high authority. It's really interesting.
It
So
is
something
fascinating.
to cultivate it with your kid. I think parenting, right? Like cultivate it with your kids. You don't want to have your teenager talk back, but you know what? That's going to serve them well in the
Yes,
world out there,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I've said for years that I think that leadership, um, you learn leadership in your childhood. And that's interesting for me because one of the things you talked to me about was about you being a teenage runaway. I
Mm,
believe that all of us sort of end up in our lives, wherever we end up, not because of a single decision, but a series of decisions that
mm,
build upon one another.
mhm.
And it's these decisions and experiences that um, inadvertently give us our life's philosophy. Like I
Yeah.
said, you told me that you were a teenage runaway. How did being a teenage runaway shape your philosophy and your approach to leadership?
Yeah, well, I think, it's funny, right? Because your strength becomes your biggest liability. And I
Absolutely.
think, and I think my dad's, you know, a lot of his strengths, domineering, driven, all of that kind of stuff, liability when you're parenting a teenager. And you've instilled in a child this questioning of authority, right? So for me, um, that thread then just got pulled through my whole life, right? So I then not going to put up with my dad anymore. I'm leaving home. And then how that played out then in terms of leadership philosophy and everything else was it made me frankly hard to be employed. Like I now, I'm an entrepreneur, been an entrepreneur now for 13, 14 years, I guess. But before that, worked for two other entrepreneurs in entrepreneurial firms for 10 before that. And I think it's just really made me value time, freedom, flexibility, the ability to be in charge of my own destiny. And I think when you have that, instilled within you, I recognized early on that working for a big multinational company was never going to work for me, because I was
Mm-hmm.
never going to have the level of independence and freedom that I needed. And I think that's so important for leaders to know and understand. Like, you can take anybody and they can be a superstar in one scenario and highly ineffective in another scenario. They haven't
Absolutely.
changed. It's the context, right, within which
Yep.
they're leading that's changed. And so I think for me, it was that realization after a certain point in my early career. I was that Gen X bounce around every couple of years. I was here, I was there, I was, advancing really quickly, but it was the same pattern. Year one, I'm teacher's pet, I'm the superstar, the manager loves me. Year two, my manager's kind of now driving me crazy because I
Mm-hmm.
figured it out more than he has or she has. And then I'd start getting itchy feet and wanting to move on, right? And so I think knowing and understanding, I think for me, what I've also realized, the more deep work you do is when you come out of an environment where you've been very controlled, you don't want to be controlled,
No.
right, in a new environment, right? And so work, depending on the workplace, I just realized my need for freedom. I had some great bosses, awesome bosses. It was still so off the chart that, it was going to be hard for me to be satisfied. And I think a lot of people don't, like, how we do anything is how we do everything. And we have these motivational drivers that will just, they just take over unless you start unpacking what is it that's underneath that, and why am I repeating this pattern, and what's going on. And I think in a leadership role, I just think you have a responsibility to understand that more and more, because your patterns and your behaviors affect the people around you. You have an effect on how they're going to be able to show up and live their best
Yeah.
life, right?
I've often said that leadership is permission, and people say, what do you mean by that? And I say, well, how you behave is permission for others to behave. And
Yes.
so if you have not self-examined, if you've not done the self-work and the self-understanding, then you're doing behaviors that are completely unconscious, and you're training your people that that's okay. And that's,
Mhm.
that's bad leadership. There's everything
Yeah.
about that is not good. So it's
Yeah.
really important. Now, the title of the book
Mhm.
is The Grassroots Leadership Revolution. So there's a lot to unpack there. So let's just start with what does that mean? This grassroots leadership revolution? Because
Yeah.
when you and I talked about it, I was like, yes, I absolutely, fully agree with this. I'm so on board with this. But I know that it's a revolution. It's a different way of looking at leadership that's
Yeah.
not been put forward or not embraced by the egoic authoritarians. So
Yes.
walk us through it a bit.
Yeah. So, like, coming up with a title for your book is one of the hardest things you'll ever do,
I
right?
don't know anything about that.
Oh man, the worst. Um, but I will tell you the spirit. And I remember so clearly driving in the car with my husband in Kelowna, like going like through those windy roads and on the phone with the publisher trying to come up with the title of the book. And I think for me, I've spent years in corporate training. I had a background before I started my business selling those management 101. Let's shove everybody in a workshop for a day or 2 days, and then magically they emerge as a great leader, and I felt like um that method doesn't work. I mean, it's
Right.
nice. It feels good in the moment. And I'm not saying you don't take away certain nuggets from it. But there was that piece of it. And then the other piece that I was really, I got really fascinated about was the work, like when I heard back in 1999, Marcus Buckingham talking about First Break All the Rules, the book that he'd written with Kurt Kaufman,
Mm-hmm.
on this whole strengths-based approach to leadership. I started really thinking a lot about the fact that, you could run great teams. Like, you can be a manager working in a total chaotic environment and still have a team that's killing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking, managers have way more the power and control than they give themselves credit for, or that they understand, or that they know how to harness. And so stop with all the complaining about my CEO this, that, da, da, da. Own it, like own your own career. And so, you start, I find in a lot of organizations, we have a very patriarchal, approach to looking after our team. And, so it's things like, oh, let's do an engagement survey. And then it becomes the responsibility of the organization to engage people. And I just think, as I was in my early 30s and I was this hypo and I was managing partner for this consulting firm, and I started going, you know what, the only person who engaged me is me. And I can't rely on my manager I can't outsource my career to this person. Like, this is completely irresponsible, right? So how do I start to take ownership myself and get away from this? Like, what if your company doesn't invest in leadership? So then you're never supposed to invest in yourself as a leader. Like, you're just going to sit there and continue doing, silly actions and behaviors. And so I thought, you know what, we need a revolution. And a lot of times it's always top down, right? Like, we need to do it from the top, roll it through the organization. We'll start here and go there. And I think, you know what, why not get it going at the grassroots level? Why not have leaders take responsibility for themselves? And I think the other thing for me too, having run a consulting firm for many years that had a lot of really smart people in it, like really smart IO psychologists, PhDs, MBAs, who'd never led a team before, had never led before. And I just really got got a deep fascination with all of these peer groups that CEOs, like Rockefeller started it, right? Like his mastermind model, and CEOs and peer groups and entrepreneurs had them. And I'm like, where are those for like those of us that are leading? Like, this idea of tapping into collective wisdom. And so that was really, the kind of the thinking behind the book. For years, I've been running these group coaching programs in companies like PepsiCo, and just seeing the power of shifting the mindset in organizations away from you as the individual leader, like, what are you doing, to this more notion of, hey, what are we doing? Hey, collectively, like, hey, Dove, how can I help you be better? What are you trying to work? And then how can you help me be better? And getting out of this, like, this egoic, hierarchical, competitive, because there's so much energy gets sucked into that in organizations. And so we talk about creating like learning cultures and coaching cultures and all of this kind of stuff, but everything's super individualized. So that was this idea: create the tribe, build the community, get people working and supporting each other. And so the Grassroots Leadership Revolution was sort of everything that I do in companies. If you can't afford to do it, you want to do it, take it in your own control, here's the roadmap to help you do that. And what I put into the book were some of our, it's almost like the best of, it's our top hits of, things you need to think about as a leader, like your values, your strengths, your personal brand. Those are all in there that you can unpack with a group. But it was really about trying to empower people to take control. Don't wait for don't wait for the HR department to figure out what the leadership program is going to be for next year. Because by the time they figured it out, it's probably out of date. The way we're moving right now.
So Glain, let's walk into this for a minute, because we've got, let's say we've got a senior VP listening to us, watching us, and they're saying, okay, I'm working for a company who does not invest in their leadership development to the degree that I would like. Like, so they think they do, but it's not what I want. And I love the company, love what they're offering, love what they're doing, but I want to develop as a leader. I can't get my company to do that. They feel stuck. They feel like they want to grow as leaders. And oftentimes those are the people who will walk away from a company, not because they don't like it, but because particularly millennials will say, I'm not developing.
Yeah.
A millennial who's going to be, this year is 40 or 41 years old, is going to say, I'm done. Like, I love you guys. I love the company, love what you're about, but I'm not growing and I got to grow. What do you say to them? Because there is no grassroots leadership in their company. So what do you say to them?
So start your own. So go through your Rolodex, find 5 other people that you respect that are at a similar age, scope, career as you. And if your company's big, pull them together inside the company or do it outside the company, pull them together, buy my book and follow it along.
Right.
You can create because I think the thing, you know what it's like, right? Like when you have to fire somebody, you can go sit in a course and you can have somebody tell you, like, when you have to fire somebody, here's the steps you go through. This is what you should say. This is, your HR team can do that. Firing somebody, though, is not just about the mechanics of what you have to do to fire. It is all the emotional stuff, right? It's when you talk too much in the firing and, oh man, this is what happened. Like that is the knowledge and wisdom that when you pull together a peer group and you are part of a peer community of leaders who are as committed and as ambitious and as, like I just work with type A people, right? They're always trying to up level. And the beautiful thing when you pull together your own group, you choose the people and you choose people that you respect and admire. They're going to up level you because, I always say peer pressure didn't end in high school, right? Like like the thing that I always love about when we run our groups is I'll see leaders come in and, say they had to do something in between the sessions. And one guy comes in, he goes, oh, I didn't have time. I was super busy. Didn't get around to it this time. And then the next person goes, oh yeah, you know what? I took that values exercise and I actually ran my team through it. And it was unbelievable. We had this breakthrough conversation and now we're using it this way and this way and this way. And then the next person goes, yeah, well, I actually ended up having a value conversation with my boss because I was feeling really frustrated and da, da, da. Now the guy who said I didn't do anything with it is looking and go, oh shit, I better start getting my act together.
Right.
Now this, right. And so this accountability, I mean, I think the thing, because our approach is really grounded in group coaching. It's a coaching program, but instead of this one-to-one thing that is so prevalent everywhere, we're saying, you know what? One-to-one, yeah, nice, good, works. When you got a goal, I'm a big fan of one-to-one coaching. But when you're trying to develop yourself as a leader, and whether you're in the system and you're doing it within your organization or you're just trying to really grow out your career, the perspective and the wisdom you get from broader points of view, people who are not in your functional area, like I find business runs so fast right now. And one of the challenges for a lot of leaders is they get very myopic, they get very down their view. And that is, to me, a lot of this stuff is mitigate career risk, man. Like you want to be like Seth Godin's book, Linchpin, to me was another great game-changing book because it's like, you want to be a linchpin? You better be invaluable. How can you be invaluable today? The buzzword on the street is agility. We need leaders to be agile. What the hell does that mean? What does it be agile mean? Well, part of getting agility is mental agility, and part of mental agility is having different viewpoints, different perspectives, different ways of thinking about the business, a deeper understanding of different parts of the business. Well, how are you going to get that? Peer groups allow you to kind of talk about real issues in leadership, but also you get this value-added context.
So we've got two elephants in the room here. One is
bring them out.
So one is the elephant in the room is the egoic, I'm not going to expose my weakness in a group, right? You and I both know that one very well.
Yeah.
And so, and the other elephant in the room is the person's listening saying, yeah, but I've been told to be a specialist. I'm supposed to be this highly focused niche specialist and not to have multiple perspectives. I have to have a drill down, absolutely specific. So those are the two things. So we got this, we're calling him Charlie right now, but Charlie's like, he's a super niche specialist. And he's also got a decent size ego that says, I'm not letting anybody know that I've got any chink in my armor. And you
Yeah.
come into this group
Yeah.
and be open. That sounds a bit kumbaya to me.
Yeah.
Doing it. I'm the best. I'm the best thing since sliced bread. And nobody's ever going to take that away from me because my identity is so freaking locked into it.
Yeah.
So let's have Charlie walk in and say those things to us. How do we confront that? Because this guy is, this Charlie is destined for that path we talked about at the beginning, which is this idea of it's lonely at the top. He's going to make sure it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But his indoctrination has been, this is what I have to be. I have to be, don't show the chink in the armor, and I have to be the absolute specialist.
Yeah. Like never let them see you sweat, right? Like that's what we're told in leadership. And yet now, but I think that's changing, Dov. Like I think that, when you think of Brene Brown and the light that she's shone on things that I know people like you and I have been doing for years is vulnerability and values in the workplace and all of this stuff. Like I think that's making it go a little bit more mainstream. I think, I've been a coach now for 20 some odd years. Not everybody's coachable. Like I'm not here to convince you one way or the other. I think though that one of the things that you're really bang on about is that a lot of people because group coaching is really becoming in vogue right now. Like a lot of companies are trying to do these you'll hear them talk about peer groups, coaching groups, and the thing about it is a system. And what you have to understand is when people come into it, they're cautious, right? They're like, what am I getting into? What is this? I don't know what this is, right? And so, what we've really learned over time is how do you accelerate trust? Like, how do you get that? And so there's, really tactical things like you have to have a confidentiality agreement. Like you have to, and everybody signs it and everybody says, this is what we're agreeing to. And we're not going to break confidentiality. And let's talk about if it gets broken, what are we going to do about that as a team? It's all about the co-creation of the experience. And so I love a good skeptic. Like for me in our programs, I love the person who's super skeptical. And what I notice is that all of us have varying levels of what we're comfortable with in terms of being vulnerable, intimacy, you name it. And you're right, senior executives have been told for years that, vulnerability is not a good thing. So you have to kind of meet people where they are and move them over. But I have seen some of the most surprising, the people that you would think would be the hardest to wrap their head around that that have the perception of ego. Once you give them that opportunity, and once they see, oh, wait, I thought you had your shit together. And I'm hearing you say you're struggling with this, and you're okay. Once you start creating that environment for people, I've actually been really amazed at how quickly that goes away. Are there people though whose ego is so huge and like they're on the narcissism scale? Probably this kind of thing is not for them, right? And they will flame out on their own, and because I do think people like that. You have to experience failure. You have to come to your own whatever bottom out is to know that, hey, I want to change, or there's something in this that I can learn from. So that for me is the ego piece. Not for everybody, but surprising the people who are the skeptics, who actually sometimes are the biggest embracers of it. I just had a chief technology officer who was in one of our programs like 6 or 8 years ago, just put a big thing on LinkedIn about his experience in our program. He's doing this recognition of 52 people. He's doing a weekly recognition of 52 people that changed his life. And so I was one of those people. And he was one of those guys, I have to say, like technology officer, not interest, like, don't talk to me about feelings. What are you talking about here? But just transformational, right? Because like suddenly started to see where he had the opportunity to make an even bigger impact. And that's what you're getting about. And then this niche thing, like, I still think you can be that subject matter expert, but you still need to know how it connects to everything else, right? Like there is still not, today organizations are so matrix. There is never that you are working in your silo. Like you always have some kind of interplay impact on other parts of the business. And so does that say that no, you like, by gathering perspectives from other people, it's not to say that that doesn't dilute your expertise, but what it does say, does it broaden your expertise? Does it broaden, the opportunities that you see within yourself? And I do think, like, so many organizations today struggle with innovation, or it's always at the top of the agenda for so many companies. And I think there's a lot to be said for external perspective in order to fuel innovation. Like, if you're all working in your, if I'm just working with people that are in the coaching industry, I get most of my ideas for our business outside of our industry. I'm always looking to see how does that services-based company do that? Like I got really fascinated into, last year, one of my big fascination points was with a lot of online big scale, like these Instagram marketers, right? Like it's not our business model, but there's always something that you can learn from people that do things totally differently, right? So that's how I would talk to the niche person about this.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, I think that oftentimes the misinterpretation is that niche means don't learn anything else.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge, in the work we do with leaders, I think it's a huge mistake. We were working with, we got an invitation to work with a company and we went and investigated, as we do. And this was, of all things, a pipe fitting company. So they might make pipe fittings for, for the government, for cities. I mean, big stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so we were invited to go and potentially work with them. So I was like, okay, let's go. I said, we'll come down, we'll have a meeting with you and we'll find out what you do. And I want to sort of a sense of the company. Like, okay. And I said, but I don't want to be there with just us. I don't want it to be focused on us, because then it's going to be about trying to cater to me. I don't want that. I just want to sort of be in. So there's, we've got this day and we've got these people coming in and they're going to be doing this and they're going to be looking at things, and you can kind of be in the crowd. And like, how many's in the crowd? About 8 or 10 people. Fantastic. Love it. So we go there and, they're walking us through the yard and showing us the things and how they build these pipes and how they build the fittings and, all this stuff. And people are really not paying attention. And we get to the end, I've just been me, but I get to the end and the owner comes up to me. He didn't know who I was. I was brought in by the CEO, not the owner. And the owner comes up to me and says, 2 of my lads in the yard have said to me, and this guy's a real old school blue collar guy who's made a, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? He says to me, my lads from the yard, he's still hands on, because my lads from the yard have said, nobody's asked more questions than you. Nobody was more interested in you. Are you from this industry? And I said, not at all. And he goes, well, why were you so interested? I go, number one, your CEO brought me in to talk to you guys, and I want to know what the heck you do. And number two, I believe that you've got something to teach me.
Yeah.
And he goes, in pipes? And I said, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's my way. It's not the thing. My way is this, is that the first thing I was an artist. The second thing I was a poet or a philosopher. So I'm always looking for the creative, and I'm looking for how things are metaphors for other things, because that's what philosophy is. And I said, this is a metaphor. So I'm walking through this. So when I am dealing with you guys, I will speak in pipe.
Yeah.
I will speak pipe to you about what it is I'm doing. And he's like, oh, what? Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean? So I told him this thing, and he says, oh, I get it. He goes, that's what that other consultant we brought in was trying to teach us, but I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. He goes, now I get it. And that's that taking this vast knowledge that you would get in a peer group and then bringing it into your niche to deliver it in a way that has them, whoever they are, get it. And I love that you're doing that. And I love that you're creating this, but it's different than I found that when we spoke about it before, Glain, that, you and I both know there are CEO peer groups, there are second level leader peer groups, etc. But I see that what you're doing is different than I'm trying to think of the one that's in Canada.
Like a YPO or a tech or a
tech, tech, right?
Yeah.
Like tech,
Yeah.
what's the Vera? Not Veritage.
Oh yeah. No, I know the one you mean.
Yeah, the one in the States. It's the sister.
Vantage.
But they seem
Vantage.
Something like that. Anyway, so whatever it's called. This seems to be different. Tell us how it's different, because there's probably people who are in part of tech or part of McKay or one of the ones that are big in Canada or the US. This is different. Tell us how it's different.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So so when I was starting my business, I've been experimenting with peer groups in the consulting firm I was a part of. And I looked at all those models, right? And so the difference between, so I'm working in the middle of the organization, right? Director through to mostly VP, sometimes SVP, depending on, if it's going up EVP, that kind of thing, scale of the organization. The difference between a CEO group is a CEO is going to make the commitment, they make the decision, they make the purchase, they go in, they can spend 25 grand a year or whatever it is and keep going into these groups. And a lot of the times when you look at what a CEO or an entrepreneur is looking for, a lot of it is around building the business and then managing the pressure of that top job. Like that is what you're getting out of a lot of those groups, right? And models and thinking. But when I was looking within the, the middle group, what was happening at the time, right? So when I started first thinking about this was about 20 some odd years ago, it was that we were either sending people off to 1, 2, 3 day workshops. We were doing these experiential things like go and do a trust fall with your team and all, hold hands and sing Kumbaya, or one-to-one executive coaching, right? Like it was like, those were your options. And so, but what I realized was that really when you're in the middle, and especially in organizations that are paying the ticket, right, which is what our clients pay the bills on our programs, they're not going to do indefinitely. It's not like every year you're going to, like, I'm a VP and every year I'm going to be in this peer group in my company and paying out, however many $1,000 every year. It just wasn't the right model. And the other thing that I was particularly interested in working with were what we talked about earlier, these high potential type A personalities, high value employees, key talent, whatever you want to label them. I have found the 80-20 Pareto effect is totally true when it comes to talent. And that 20% that deliver your 80%, they're wired differently. Yes. And as somebody who was in that group myself, I don't have the patience to sit in a 3-day workshop. I don't have the patience to listen to stuff that I already know. And I'm a big so what person. I'm like, why are you telling me this? How's this going to help me on the job? And so that was where coaching, that's why to me, I felt like coaching was getting a lot of traction, was because it allowed you to have that. But what was missing in coaching was this more mentorship and learning from people who'd actually done it. And so that was where the Roundtable program, our signature program has been designed to really appeal to that particular audience. And the other layer on this that I started to really see in that director VP, it's no longer now about what they're doing. You're smart. That's why you've been promoted. Now it's all about the how. It's all about the how. I sat and I've listened to conversations about, well, I don't know if that guy can get promoted because you ever notice how much he uses his hands in meetings, or, like, I don't know that they've got executive presence or da-da-da. And so what I really, and I'm a tutor of Marshall Goldsmith's behaviorally based coaching approach. I've been that way, for years using a very behaviorally anchored 360 tool. And so I just went, you know what? The hardest thing people struggle with is the behavior. It's the how they need to now start showing up And nobody tells you that. Your manager's probably really crappy at having a how conversation. So what do we do instead? We work around your weird quirks. We work around the personality things. You don't know that that's derailing you. You don't know that that's limiting your potential, because nobody's going to be straight up and say to you, you know, the fact that you're always laughing nervously in meetings is going to mean that you're never going to get beyond this level in the organization. But that's what happens, right? So what I wanted to do is sort of take what, you know, often happens to leaders is that they'll get their performance feedback and they're told, you need to be more strategic. They write that down. I need to be more strategic. They leave the office. They have no idea what being more strategic means.
Right.
No clue. So then what the Roundtable program allows people to do is go, okay, let's break down what more strategic means. Let's really understand, what is it that you're not doing? And 9 times out of 10, for leaders that are director level and above, it's not actually that they're not strategic. It's that they're highly innovative, let's say. And so they're the person that comes in every morning going, oh, when I was in the shower this morning, I had this great idea. And everybody goes, yeah, he's a great idea person, not strategic. Oh, he could have thought about it, but it's because he's always like, oh, what's the behavior? It's what you say, it's what you do. That's all it is. So if you're coming in blasting out, you know, like all your great ideas and not also balancing that with the strategic language, you're going to look like somebody who's not strategic. So that's what we really help people do. We call it the big bang for the buck behavior. What's going to be the behavior, one behavior that if you just shifted it a little bit, it's going to be a game changer for you. So we get them focused on that. And then that's really the program that they work on with us, is that for a year, they're working on their behavior, their manager's involved. And that's why it's a little different, because now you're in a group and I see you. So you and I are in the same meeting together. You know, I'm working on maybe being succinct, or I'm working on being more assertive in a meeting, because we're in this group program together. And then after the meeting, you walk out of the meeting, you say to me, hey, Glain, you did a good job in there. I saw you do a better job being more succinct in there. And I'm getting real-time feedback. And I now have a cohort of people who have my back. And I got my manager, because, you know, like our brains get wired to pigeonhole people, right? We get wired to say, okay, you're the late guy, you're this guy, you're that guy. We get the managers involved. The managers now start looking for the new behavior. We start erasing old tapes.
So how does, let's just, because I'm now going to being in the audience and saying, okay, so this is good. How do I recognize I've done the Colby test, I've done the strengths test, I've done the, whatever it is test. How do I recognize, because we all have these horrendous blind spots. And the problem with a blind spot, and I always tell this to my clients, the problem with a blind spot is if I tell you what the blind spot is, you'll still be blind to it. You might even go, oh, really? I didn't know that. And then you'll repeat exactly the same thing. Yeah. So how do we get these people to recognize that one behavior that they need to focus in on? And I get that the peer group will recognize it, and once it's called, and will help you to sort of steer that. So you tend to ramble. So let's, what's your point, Fred? Okay, or you tend to give too many details, or whatever it is that person does. Yeah. How do you get them to So okay, everybody can remind them. That's what the advantage of a peer group. Get that? That's fantastic. But how do we get them to recognize this is the behavior?
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways we come at it. I mean, one is like having them do a behavioral 360. There's a lot of really horrendous 360 tools out there. But if you've got a really good like we have a developmental behavioral 360 that we use that helps, like it gets you narrower. I always ask in my behavioral 360 2 questions. Tell me 3 things this leader does really well. Tell me one thing that this leader could do more of to increase their impact. And when you get people's actual written things down, so I'll tell you, like a guy I'm coaching right now, he's the president of a organization. Lot of issues, very assertive. Grew up in an environment that was just like basically you rip each other down in meetings. Like that's what you do. Like he's a
Mm-hmm.
fighter, super dominant, really smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Strategist, like just a strategist. And so, I'm getting the earful from HR about, hey, this guy these are all the issues that we're seeing. And it's the overblown side of the dominant behavior, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I get his 360 back, shows me that, yeah, he's a kind of a my way or a highway leader. Like he's not really big on any team playing behaviors, and he's really assertive with his thinking. When I ask the questions, what are the three things this person does well, and what's the one thing they could do more of? Total consistent theme. What does he do well? Strategy, thinker, problem solver. Like these are like some amazing talents.
Mm-hmm.
What could he do more of? Be more open-minded, ask more questions, be less reactionary, right? So the one behavior that we narrowed him down on after he cried his way through his feedback. No, I shouldn't say cried his way, but after he had to deal with all that feedback, is restraint, right? Like, so there's two things for him. Like one is he puts an immense amount of pressure on himself. So we have to kind of create a plan where he's, introducing some mindfulness techniques, like getting the mind slowing down because his mind's going at 100 miles an hour. But this is going to sound crazy, but he's got little prompts like smile more, ask more questions, and start meetings with 5 minutes of social chit chat. Like those are like he only has 3 things he has to do. Those are the 3 things. And so on Zoom calls, I was on a call with him with like the CEO and the, his boss and blah, blah, blah. And, like he sat there the whole time with the face, like, like down to his navel. And I said, look, you don't look like somebody who's at all inspiring or engaged or anything, sitting there with this glum look on your face. So about a month later, I'm talking to his boss. And his boss said, what did you tell him to do? And I said, well, I told him one of his things is to smile. He goes, he's smiling all the time. He's like it's like he's transformed himself into another person. Like, that's all it is. But like when I talk to him behind the scenes, he's like, yeah, I'm smiling. Yeah, I think it's making a difference. I don't know. He doesn't really want to be smiling, but he's got a little note in his phone. He set up like, the Brendan Bouchard, thing on the phone, intention reminder alarm on the phone, smile, do this, do that. This is the thing, right? We've got to help people break it down into little small actions that they can do that they may feel like I know he feels the stuff is ridiculous.
Yes.
But it's making a difference. And what he's noticing is people are coming to him now with more ideas, right? And so when we're working in a group and with our program, that's what we do is we front end everything with everybody, say, let's get real clear on your thing. But then we have what we call it the daily top 5. It's like, okay, so now you got the behavior. So now what's the daily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you're just going to keep front and center, and you're just going to action, and you're going to think this is nuts, but that's okay. And it sounds crazy to people because you're like, well, smiling at people, isn't that like an obvious thing? Not for this guy. It's obvious for you. It's not for this guy because that's not how he was brought up.
Yeah,
It's
I was
not
going to
what
say, see, it's really
valued.
important to recognize, it's one of the things that we do with our clients is to recognize that this person's bad behavior is not bad behavior to them. It
No.
may be, first of all, it may be protective behavior for them.
Yeah.
Second of all, it may be completely, totally, and absolutely unconscious.
100%.
So, right. So I say to people all the time, you've probably heard the term resting bitch face. I know we're not allowed to say those kinds of things anymore, or resting asshole
RBF.
face, right? Right.
Mhm.
Resting asshole face is the male version, right?
Yeah.
And I say, here's what I want you to know. I always tell this to people, here's what I want you to know. I have resting asshole face. Me, Dove. I have that because I have a face that looks like it's been punched because I used to do martial arts and box because I did get punched. And on top of that, I grew up in a very, very rough environment that was where I learned that my environment was threatening. So my face is formed by cortisol in my childhood. My resting face is not smiley because it was under threat. Those muscles were formed by cortisol in my brain when I was a child. My wife is the most smiley person you'd ever meet. She's like an advert for Colgate, right? She's just a big smiley person. She grew up in an environment that was incredibly threatening as well. But she grew up being trained to always look happy and smiley because her father was a minister. You've got to always get the right impression. So she's like, and everybody in the family's, oh yeah, big smiles. Yeah. Those faces are unconscious. My wife's natural smiley face is her resting smiley face is trained, as is my resting fearful face, which turns into resting asshole face. The truth of the matter is those are unconscious. Yeah. And until we can make them conscious, we're not aware of them. And the great thing about it is, you know, one of the things I do in my groups is I'll say, I want you to go around with, you know, like 6 people, and you know, you can probably do something similar. But so I want you to go around and I want you to like spend like a minute, maybe a minute and a half, telling us how you think you come across. Yeah. And that is mind blowing. Yes. Because everybody goes, oh, I think I come across like this. And then people go, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I'm in the room with you. None of that was true. Like, you don't come across like that. You know, so I often think that I come across as very aggressive. And the people who know me like, oh no, you come across as so warm. And yet I hear from other people, oh, you come across as so aggressive. And then I have to go, well, who is on the other side of that? Yeah, but because that's also their filter and bias. Exactly. And I did a program last year and it was super eye-opening because they made us watch a movie and we weren't allowed to talk in the movie at all. And we weren't allowed to talk after the movie. We weren't allowed to discuss the movie at all. But what we had to do is we had to write down what we were reacting to in the movie and what were the parts of the movie that made us uncomfortable and what were the parts of the movie that we enjoyed, what got us triggered, all of that stuff. And then the next day we were allowed to talk about it. And it was fascinating to me because there was stuff in that movie that I was like, oh, I had a total reaction. So one of the things that I had a reaction to is the women in the movie were very insipid. They were like looking for the men to make their decisions, right? Now, doesn't that tie back to what I told you about myself in terms of independence and that, right? Yeah. And so, and other people, other women in the room were like, oh, I didn't get that at all. No, I didn't see it that way at all, right? So it's like, that is exactly how, you know, all of us struggle with, I'm married to my opposite, right? Like I love him, but we are like polar opposites on everything. As animated as I am, he's like, you know, I always say if my husband won $1 million, he'd be like, oh, that's won $1 million. Wow. Right? Like there'd be no reaction. And so I think where we get into challenges in our relationship is that, right? Like is the biases and how we come at it are so different. And I think that's the thing that I'm super fascinated about, like in the work that we do, is that, you know, when you're just taking people out and coaching them one-to-one, that's not the issue. Like me as an external coach coaching you, like the danger is I become your little, you know, receptacle for all the, the problems you have at work, and I become an enabler because I'm like, oh, poor you, and oh, yes, it's them, blah, blah, blah. And I think the thing when you coach groups in the context of an organization, you can start to then help work through the dynamic, like it goes from one-to-one to the pairs within the group, to the group collectively, to outside, and the way they interact with the organization. And I think as we think about, you know, organizations are systems, they're organisms, they're, you know, it's the collective. What is culture? It's the collection of our collective behaviors that we're bringing in to this particular, you know, structure that we call the corporation. I think that's what we need to be having more conversations about in leadership. Like, it's not just about, oh, don't I know that I'm a, you know, 3393 in Colby, and isn't that fascinating? No. Okay. I'm a 3393 and half of my team are like
fact finder 8723, fact finder follow through people. Okay, so how is the way I like to work impacting the way they like to work? How
Yeah.
can we come together to understand that? And how does collectively our energy as a group, like with me having, like, I have a team that's very skewed in a certain direction because I hired my opposites, right? I hired people that were not like me because I knew what I needed to get done. I wanted to be able to get rid of stuff that I didn't want to do. So I hired people that actually love to do this stuff. But where it becomes friction for me as a business owner is that it can sometimes get a little lonely because I got a team of people that are very collegial and like to get along but don't make decisions, don't drive. And then that's my energy, right? And so I think the more we start to understand not just ourselves, but what happens when you start pulling people together and the connection within that, right? So that's for me the next evolution of leadership development is we got to get out of this silo mentality of, hey, you're the leader, go learn about leadership. Okay, great. Now we've trained you up, you're one person, but then you're going to come back into the Borg that operates this way. How do you integrate all of that? And so that's where I think when you can start to shift from, hey, it's not just about you and your leadership. It is about you and your leadership, but it's also about you and your leadership in relation to other people and how collectively you're developing. That's the leadership. I don't know, it's 2.0 or 3.0, but we got to get there, right?
Absolutely.
And we're social beings, like we're better. Like organizations have gotten way too transactional, like relationships in organizations way too transactional. And I think the pandemic that, we've been living through 2020 and into 2021 has just amplified all of that, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah, we're at a big transformational time.
Social. Yeah.
I think we're at a great transitional time, and I think that what you're putting forward is really, as you said, is the next level of understanding of where we have to go, because we are first and foremost relational. We're tribal. We need to connect, and that's important. Glain, this has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared. I would love for you to tell our audience where they can find out more about you and all your fabulous resources before we close up.
Yeah, so they can find out more about the Roundtable and the work we do in group coaching at goroundtable.com. And if you're a coach listening to this and you want to learn more about group coaching, you can go to thegroupcoachacademy.com.
Okay, so the groupcoachacademy.com if you're a coach and you want to know more, and your general website for everything else is goroundtable.com. And of course, we will post all of the links, including all the social links, in the show notes, so you'll be able to get them there. If you just scroll down, you'll be able to find them. All right, well, listen, Glain, it was a fabulous conversation. Thank you for all that you've shared. Thank you for your insights and your wisdom, and I hope that you'll stay with us to the end.
Absolutely. It was great talking to you. Thanks so much for the great questions. You kept me on my toes.
Thank you. And for you to listen, remember, you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode or any other past episode in our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're working at only a fraction of your true capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or a leadership strategist for yourself or for your organization, go to dovbaron.com, because unified meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in both individuals and in companies. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about who around you can you surround yourself with, could be a peer group to help you see yourself in a better way, and to help you find that one behavior that you might want to shift, and how to do it, how to get a vision into yourself that you may not have before. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your dragonfire to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.